I came across these tweets from Eddie Chambers. And by the way, Eddie Chambers is also saying that he has been inspired by Tyson Fury to return to the ring because of Tyson Fury's comeback from depression, drink and drug problems, his mental demons. And Eddie Chambers says that it was demons which hindered him in his career the most. It was always a mental issue for him. And I don't know whether he suffered from mental health problems, but certainly when it comes to, I guess, self-belief and confidence, it appears from what he's saying in the tweets that he suffered from issues with regards to that. But anyway, these tweets, he's talking about this particular era of boxing, not specifically the heavyweight division, but he says boxing. I'm going to say the heavyweight division, and I don't know whether he really did mean that, but you can apply it to the rest of boxing, but I think it's more specific to the heavyweight division. Now, what does Eddie Chambers say? He says, fans need to appreciate this era of boxing because when these fighters are done, you're going to miss them, a lot of special fighters. Now, somebody replied here and they said, I disagree. The top names rarely fight each other. It seems people care more about protecting their old and giving the fans what they want. And that is a criticism that a lot of boxing fans come up with. Eddie Chambers responded by saying, go back to any era. It's always the shoulda, woulda, coulda fight matchups we wished to happen. Let's all just hope they happen. Boxing always been a business first. And I agree with what Eddie Chambers is saying here. A lot of boxing fans look back on past eras of boxing with rose-tinted glasses and they act as though there wasn't any ducking going on. They act as though there wasn't any protected fighters. They act as though there wasn't any milking of certain rivalries. They act as though when two fighters had a rivalry, we didn't have to wait years and years and years for them to get in the ring and sort it out. But that's just not true. I've mentioned many times the heavyweight era in the 1990s with Evander Holyfield, Riddick Bowe, Lennox Lewis, Mike Tyson, etc. There were many rivalries in that era which never actually produced a fight. At least not a professional fight. The most famous one being Lennox Lewis's rivalry with Riddick Bowe. They had a fight in the Seoul Olympics in '88, which Lennox Lewis won by second round TKO. And it was expected that as professionals, they would face off at some point, but they never did. Lennox Lewis even, was it Lewis who said it to Bowe or Bowe who said it to Lewis? I forget now. But when they were on the podium during the Olympics, Riddick Bowe got the silver medal, Lewis got the gold. I think it was Bowe who turned to Lewis and said, see you in the pros. So even they themselves felt like they would fight each other in the pros, but they never did. Riddick Bowe famously ducked Lennox Lewis when they were originally supposed to fight because Lewis was the mandatory challenger for the undisputed heavyweight champion. Well, he's mandatory, WBC mandatory actually. And when Riddick Bowe beat Evander Holyfield for the undisputed title, Bowe was then mandated to fight Lennox Lewis, but rather than fight Lennox Lewis, he threw his WBC belt in the trash on television. And years later, his trainer Eddie Futch, and this was long after Eddie Futch had stopped training Riddick Bowe. I think this was even after Riddick Bowe retired. But yeah, many years later, Eddie Futch did an interview in which he admitted that it was him who blocked Riddick Bowe from fighting Lennox Lewis after Riddick Bowe beat Evander Holyfield. He felt that Riddick Bowe wasn't mentally mature enough to take on somebody like Lennox Lewis. He wasn't developed enough mentally. And he was concerned about that fight, so he was the one behind Riddick Bowe ducking Lennox Lewis at that point. Now, later on in their careers, there was a time when Riddick Bowe was willing to fight Lennox Lewis, but Lewis ended up losing to Oliver McCall, and that scuppered that. And I think there might have been one other time where they were ready to fight, but something happened to Bowe. Yeah, Bowe ended up getting beaten up by Gallotta twice. And even though Bo won those fights on disqualification, back-to-back fights, Bo's career was effectively over after the beating he took from Galata. I remember he had those 3 hellacious fights with Evander Holyfield prior to the Galata fights. But the Galata fights really finished Riddick Bowe as a fighter. He was never the same after those. And instead of fighting Riddick Bowe, Lennox Lewis ended up fighting Andrew Galata, the guy who'd lost by disqualification both times. And Lewis knocked Galata out in 1 round. But as I say, there were several moments in their career, several times in their careers when they were supposed to fight, but the fights never happened. Another example of fights that people talked about, rivalries that were getting built up that never happened. Mike Tyson versus George Foreman. When George Foreman came back in I guess it was like the late 80s when he came back, he was supposed to fight Mike Tyson. There was so much talk about George Foreman fighting Mike Tyson, but it never happened. There was even, I don't want to say it was a rivalry, but there was a fight that a lot of people wanted to see between Evander Holyfield and Razor Ruddock. That fight never happened. You go to, as I say, the 90s even, and man, let me think of some other fights that didn't happen. Ray Mercer versus Mike Tyson is one fight a lot of people wanted to see. Obviously, Lennox Lewis, Vitaly Klitschko, the rematch, that never happened. Lennox Lewis retired. What else was there now? There were so many fights. You know, I could rack my brain all day and think about all the heavyweight showdowns that didn't happen. And in much more recent times, you had Ricky Hatton, for example, not in the heavyweight division, obviously. Ricky Hatton had a domestic rivalry with Junior Witter. That fight never happened. It seemed like it should happen. It needed to happen. It made sense, but it never took place. So this era in boxing, and specifically the heavyweight division, is not so different to other eras in heavyweight boxing. You know, now one thing I can say is that during and post the Mayweather era, a lot more emphasis was placed on preserving your O, because Mayweather used to use this as a badge of honor. Oh, I'm undefeated and etc. And so many other fighters and their promoters and managers used that undefeated record as a promotional tool. They used it as the gold standard. They saw that Mayweather had done that, so they wanted to manage their career in a similar way, to whereby they can break records and brag about their O and all this type of business. But look, Mayweather not only was a great fighter, but he was one of the best managed fighters I've ever seen, particularly when he took his career into his own hands. Him, along with Al Heyman, were absolute masters at picking the right fights at the right time against the right opponents. Mayweather took over the Mexican Cinco de Mayo holiday and used that as his fight day every year. That was a master stroke, really, when it comes to management and marketing himself, etc. So Mayweather was not only a great fighter, but one of the best managed fighters in history. Not every fighter could be managed that well. Not every fighter, obviously, most fighters don't have the skill and the ability Mayweather has. So it's not really realistic for a lot of fighters out there, any fighter out there really at this point, certainly the vast majority, to be going down the Floyd Mayweather route. I mean, you've had people like Andre Ward, who's retired undefeated. But apart from him, the greatest, many of the greatest fighters in boxing right now, or some of the greatest fighters, you look at Canelo Alvarez, right? He's right up there in the top 10 pound for pound. He's lost. Gennady Golovkin, he's right up there. He's lost. Vasyl Lomachenko, he's right up there, very close to the top of the pound for pound list. He's lost. You do have undefeated fighters, obviously. You've got your Terence Crawfords. You've got your, Wilders and Joshuas and Furies. But the point I'm making is, in this particular era, there's a lot of young fighters who are looking up to a Vasyl Lomachenko. You know, they're looking up to a Canelo. They're looking up to a Golovkin. And if those guys have got losses on their records, they might not be so concerned about having a loss. You know, boxing goes through different epochs and different eras. And I think we're moving out of the Mayweather era where people are so concerned about preserving their unbeaten records and all that kind of thing. Obviously, there is still an element of it going on, but I think we're moving out of it and moving out of it quite quickly, because at the end of the day, as I said, are you going to tell me that Vasyl Lomachenko's not a fantastic fighter because he's got a loss on his record? You know, lots of young fighters look up to Lomachenko. They look up to Canelo and Golovkin and all these guys. So, yeah, I think as someone who is a veteran boxing fan, I don't think this era is so much worse than previous eras when it comes to big fights not happening and rivalries being allowed to simmer for a very long time. I mean, put it like this. A year ago, the top heavyweights, Anthony Joshua, Joseph Parker, Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, the 4 top guys, didn't have a loss between them. Now, Parker's got a loss, and after December 1st, unless it's a draw, either Fury or Wilder's going to have a loss. So then there'll only be 2 of the very top heavyweights who are undefeated left. If you still want to count Joseph Parker as one of the top heavyweights, well, actually, Dylan White has overtaken him now, hasn't he? And Dylan White has got a loss. Luis Ortiz has got a loss. So basically what I'm saying is, it's getting to the point now where nearly all of the relevant heavyweights have got a loss, at least one loss. And at that point, they're going to cease to give a you-know-what about fighting whoever they want to fight, because there's no O to preserve anymore. You understand? So I think we're moving in the right direction. And I know there are a lot of people who are critical of the Deontay Wilder-Tyson Fury fight. And look, it is not happening in the best of circumstances. I would have preferred Tyson Fury to have more time to prepare. I would have preferred Tyson Fury to have another fight in the interim before taking on Deontay Wilder. But as the saying goes, don't wait for the perfect moment. Take the moment and make it perfect. And that's what Tyson Fury is attempting to do. I applaud him for that. And hopefully we get a competitive and compelling heavyweight title fight out of it on December 1st. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the current era in boxing. I'm very hopeful. I'm very optimistic as usual. I'm a glass is half full kind of guy, but I also think I'm a realistic kind of guy when it comes to boxing. I remember the past eras, and I think this era stacks up quite well. Thank you very much. So anyway, let me know how you guys feel in the comment section below. It's happening. I'm out.
Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.